Right Night is a talk show with published authors, writers, and content creators discussing both the creative and technical sides of writing, as well as the industry surrounding it, from novels to screenplays to comics and more. And now, here's your host, author Travis I. Sivart.
Hey everybody, welcome to Right Night. I am Travis, the host, and I'm also author of, here's my baby right now. Here's what I'm working on. I'm working on book 3 of Portals. Book 1 and 2 are out. Book 3 is up for pre-sale and should be releasing December 1st, barring, 2020 from rolling forward like it normally does. That tonight's topic is going to be... I've always got to double check. We change it every damn week. Constructing a complex hero. And I also want to let our live audience know we are recording this for a podcast. It is a subscriber-only chat, but everybody else is welcome to watch and hang out with us as we record it. And for our podcast audience, I want to remind you we are live on twitch.tv/Travis Tavern Talk every Saturday night at 8, as well as Sunday with Stealing for Survival, a Dungeons & Dragons game that I run on Sunday nights in the same world that Portals takes place in. Aaron plays in it. And then Monday night, Talk the Tavern. I also have Aaron there as we talk about, topics, tangents, and toasts. I think I did disclaimer, did all that. Let's do some intros of you guys. Let's pass it over to Aaron Kennedy.
Hi, I'm Aaron Kennedy. I'm the author of Persona Non Grata, first book in the Ships of Valor series. Currently working on Icarus Black, which is taking place in the same universe. I've been a technical writer for 25 years. I've been published in the NCO Journal and the Army Times. For spelling of my name, that's Aaron. Last name's Kennedy, just like the dead president. Travis didn't mention it, but Travis I. Sivart. Sivart is just Travis backwards.
There you go.
Michael?
Yep.
Oh, go ahead.
Hey everybody, my name is Michael Thompson, independent author and illustrator from Northern Virginia. One of my books is World of the Orb. It's a portal fantasy adventure about a couple of best friends who sneak away from their group on a field trip to the Museum of Natural History and discover the hidden world the museum is desperately trying to keep secret. Very excited to talk to you guys today about creating heroes and balancing social media later on in the second hour. For all my books, you can find them on michaelthompsonbooks.com.
And just to clarify for those on podcasts, the Balancing Social Media is the next episode, as opposed
That's
to
right.
later in this one. We're going from a 2-topic episode format to a 1-topic episode format. So if you want to hear them both in a row, play them back to back. Okay. I also want to remind everybody, as Aaron was letting you know about the spelling of our names, the reason he did that is because you can find any one of us on the web or on Amazon and get our books that are on sale. So check us out there. Other than that, if you want merchandise to back up the show and support the show, you can do that right here on twitch.tv/Travis Tavern Talk. Now let's look at I think we did all this stuff and all the pimping, and let's go on to just jumping right into constructing a complex hero. Now, first, I'd love to get your guys' take on what exactly is a complex hero and why do you even care? So, Michael, you got some thoughts on this to start?
Sure. I would say a complex hero or any complex character is a character that you forget is a character that you forget you are reading and you're fully immersed in. Anyone who has believable character traits or something that about them that may surprise you or stand out to you, someone that feels real.
And Aaron, why would you say it's important to have complex characters, especially your primary character?
We want our readers to feel like they can take place in the story, and if the character's just one-sided, that doesn't work. Great examples are Stan Lee in the 60s. He created the X-Men, Fantastic Four, and all that. Fantastic Four is first and foremost a family. Yes, they're heroes, but they're a family, and they got their own relationship issues that create better dynamics. The X-Men were students, and then the newer version that came out towards the 70s, you ended up with Wolverine, Nightcrawler, expanded on others. But Wolverine's a great complex hero because he's essentially a fallen samurai who was also a mutant. Whereas Kurt Wagner, our Nightcrawler character, he's amazing because he's a practicing Roman Catholic. He's got the visage of the devil for all intents and purposes, but he's a happy-go-lucky guy. So he's got these three main things that we kind of go in on there. And then when you combine him with his inner relationships with Wolverine, you got this gruff loner whose best friend is this Errol Flynn demon. That's a great complexity that you can get behind.
That's Fafford and the Grey Mouser. Which, by the way, I think I mentioned them last week. If you guys have a chance to read them, I really recommend Fritz Lieber's work. He's essentially the inventor. He coined the phrase swords and sorcery when it comes to writing.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and he largely influenced Gary Gygax as well as all the people who later came out in the 80s writing fantasy and making all these role-playing games that we love now. He very much influenced. Matter of fact, in the Deities and Demigod original edition, it had multiple mythos that were pulled out because they were fictional mythos as opposed to historic, and the Newhonian Lankamar mythos was one of those. It was copyright issues, and they had to pull it out there, as well as Cthulhu, Lovecraft.
Oh, yes.
So,
what are your guys' favorite complex heroes from your own books that you've written?
Hart is probably there. We've got Airy. Airy's a simple narrator. He's the Holmes to Hart's. He's the Watson to Hart's Holmes.
Yeah.
We find out touches of history and how he kind of thinks, but from an AI perspective, you're constantly delving into that. Whereas Airy's simple. I spend a total of, I think, 3 lines describing Airy. I give his height, I give his weight, and I do one contrast with another secondary character. Hart, I spend lots and lots of time describing. We know what his motivations are. We know why he's trying to do things. We know why he's interacting with everything else. Airy, you toss him into a situation and he's just kind of, I don't want to say he's two-dimensional, but he's just a hair past that in comparison to what Hart is.
For me, this is a layered question about layered characters. When compared to what I'm writing now versus what I wrote before, the layering, the complexity of a character, the realism of a character comes so much easier now than it ever did before. And pardon me, I'm just adjusting my fan because my computer's getting a little warm. Okay, so previously I think Croker Norge was one of my more complex characters, but he was still only a couple dimensions in that he was old and crotchety and grouchy, but he always wanted to do the right thing. Heart of Gold, there we go. Like I said, I could definitely see him and Winslow hanging out. I don't even know if they'd get along, but I think they'd walk away respecting each other. I'm not going to say they'd be friends, but I'd definitely say they'd be like, he's got something going on there. He's okay.
Cool.
But now in the stuff that I'm currently writing with Portals, it's actually a goal of mine to make sure I have that complexity. And for me, we can get a little more into this in a few minutes. complexity to me means less achievements and more flaws. Now, that is not to say they can't have a ton of achievements, but the importance of the flaws are far outweigh any kind of achievement or skill level or success. I think it makes a more interesting character, and that's almost, when I started writing, it felt counterintuitive, but it's totally right. I will guarantee that one. So now, I love Nathan. I really like Nathan. I really like the kid in Portals book 1 and 2, and Nathan came in book 2, and he'll be here for book 3 and 4 also if it continues that far. And then he'll leave the books. But I guess I relate to him. He's a nice guy. He doesn't like confrontation, but he also doesn't like bullies. But he doesn't mind if he's bullied. So, yeah, he's very cool. And I think the rest, like Silver and
I
Smith.
like that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Silver and Smith only has one book, and I don't feel like I layered them enough. I want more depth to them. And book 2 will bring that. Now, what about you, Michael? Which one are you looking at?
Well, I'm thinking about Winslow right now, especially since I just finished the illustrations for the second book, the interior illustrations, and I'm so
Nice.
happy about that. Yeah, the titular character from my Sea Stories book, Winslow Hoffner's Incredible Encounters. He's a fisherman who happens to come across some amazing cryptids and urban legends out on his voyages. And they have the form of classic fisherman's tales, but Winslow is like a living contradiction. Everything, like from far back, when you look at him, you think, oh, grizzled old fisherman. But as you zoom in, you learn all these things that are contradictions of what you might expect. And I think contradiction is a big component to making a character complex. Contradiction to what you would expect and what they might do and what they might decide to do, and then contradiction in what they grow into. What's cool is really seeing like what makes a certain character contradict themselves, what makes a certain character do something that is out of character, and that's something to do after you've gotten to know them pretty well. But yeah, what do you think, Aaron?
Well, no, I think the character's always acting in character. It's not that they're in reverse of or they're. It's just something unexpected.
Something unexpected, yes.
Right. We just don't necessarily. The situation has changed to where, oh, he's reacting differently than our preconceived notion, which adds a layer of complexity. It's still within what he's going to do.
Yeah.
And I think there's a nuanced difference there. Because as we read Winslow Hoffner's, it's a great book, by the way, everybody. Check it
Thank
out. Nothing that happens to him is outside of my perceived reality of him. He never does anything that's there, but everything that he does is unexpected.
That's
So
right.
it's like, oh, we're figuring this out.
And something unexpected is it's when your characters do it, it's a lot like that's sort of what draws you into a story, like the inciting incident or anything that can happen in plot that's really engaging, and you're like, oh, I'm hooked. And then when your characters do it, and when they're pushed to make a hard decision, for instance, that takes the culmination of their experience both on and off the page, then you see the thinking and living dynamics of a real person.
Well, it's like a great example is Batman and Robin. Okay, the persona of Batman would never adopt Robin,
Right.
except he would because he suffered the same trauma.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's the only reason that's the only reason that's plausible. Why would Bruce Wayne adopt Dick Grayson? It just doesn't make sense. The Batman would not do this. Would not until you go, oh wait, he just saw the kid lose his family in the same way I lost mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't handle that. So
spoiler alert.
Yes, because several movies and 100 years of comics.
Bruce Wayne is Batman?
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
I have a quick tangent here.
Okay.
I am at the inciting incident, essentially, in Portals 1. I'm right at the 25% mark where Act 1 is ending. Inciting incident has actually kind of already happened, but now you're being thrust into the story and into the world and entering Act 2. And I have the three main characters sneaking out of town because the new character came into this world as the figure publicly being executed in front of the most of the town. Of a town that's one of the strongest ones remaining in this fantasy apocalyptic world that's run by mages and military.
Cool.
So the two main characters that were there from previous books had to rescue her and spirit her away. And now they're trying to sneak out of town, so they have to fight their way out of town. And they're at the gate, which, by the way, I had a great scene. I loved writing it because this is, spoilers for those that haven't read the first book, this is the first time the reader it's ever brought to the reader's attention. They're not all from the same time period in modern Earth. They've come from different decades. Cool. And the new character, when she died in our world, it was during a march, a protest in 1965 with Martin Luther King in Chicago, and she went down under a brick. And when she realizes one of the characters might be Jewish, she like, ugh. And the other guy's like, what, you're going to have a problem when you find out I was black? And she's like, oh no, I support your people. So you have this dichotomy of racism, discrimination, when in fact the reason the town was killing her is because she's the elf breed in my world, Aphine. So she's actually on the other side of discrimination in a very harsh way. But besides this, they're trying to sneak out of town. They do get noticed. And here's this debutante from Ivy League schools in the 60s who now has the ability to elementalist magic. So summon fire, create ice. She has power she's never had before after being essentially a second-class citizen in the 60s. Even as a white person, being female, there was not equality. There's still not equality, but we won't go into that. And then you have the barbarian charging off to fight somebody, and then you have the meek guy in the middle, and I have to decide what he's going to do. Does he stop her from going over the edge and pushing her power? Does he stop the barbarian from charging into a fight against 2 spell slingers and 8 guards? And that's where I stopped writing at.
Well, perhaps it's the being paralyzed by the situation. Like inaction can have consequences as well.
That's a great
What were you
idea.
going to say, Aaron?
Well, Jim Butcher, the guy who wrote the Dresden Files,
Right.
His most recent book came out. He talks about how to end a scene. You can end it in 3 possible ways. You can end it as the characters wanted it. Okay, so it's a positive outcome. You can end it where they don't, in an opposite way, or you can kind of mix the two. Yes, they get a positive outcome in an unexpected way, or a negative outcome in a positive way. You flip them around.
Right.
So the trick to getting people to keep moving is you don't want to have the expected outcome, because why do you have that scene then? You gloss over it.
With that one, I do. This is mid-chapter, by the way. This is not the end of a scene.
Oh.
This chapter started with them being noticed by the guards at 2 a.m. as they're trying to sneak out of town. And actually, they were noticed when they got to bickering about the whole race thing. That drew the guards' attention. And that's where.
But oh, go ahead. But where do you want the scene to end?
With them
which
out of
can
town.
set you up for right. I get it right, but you want to end the scene with them out of town in a positive, negative mixed, or negative. So that's the seed that you're planting now, is to figure out, oh, I've got to get to the point I want to end it at.
There's more information you don't have.
Oh, check.
No, I'm going to tell you now. They are being followed by the bounty hunter in the previous chapter that was set on them, who said he's not going to follow them until he has what he needs that can basically make sure he has protection against their magics. But he is following them, and he is going to interfere and eliminate the guards as they're escaping, because the guards he can handle. He needs these other things before he can do that. He also wants the power that will come with taking them down. So now you have the antagonist actually assisting them, but framing them for these actions, so the whole town will now actively be out to get all of them. So the fun part is, and Aaron, I definitely understand and appreciate everything you're saying there, and this is not to draw anything away from that. I like what Mike said, because I didn't even consider having that middle character not take action. And that is an interesting way to go. And then let the other two let loose and perhaps break themselves a little. This girl who only wanted to help people now being destructive, and that would be harmful to her psyche. And so, yeah, that opens up some new possibilities. But Aaron, you'll definitely end with the mixed bag outside those walls.
No. And to your point, no action is always a possibility. We no action is an action. It's just it's kind of like voting. If I choose not to vote, I still voted. I just voted for none of the above.
Yeah. You mean libertarian?
Something I like.
You mean libertarian?
No. Well, yeah, but friggin', I've got a candidate in the race.
Something I like that both of you are saying are the compounding of experiences, and that was an excellent tangent, because we see Travis's writer gears turning and already thinking about how this is going to affect how the characters change and develop in the future. So compounding experiences, I think that leads us to another thing that we've highlighted there is what informs the complexity of your character, of your hero.
Well, Robert Jordan was great about that. Now, yes, he was long-winded in the first 10 books before he died, but he was great about creating compounding experiences.
Much
you see
less
character
long-winded
growth.
once he was dead.
Yeah, well, he still wrote 2 books. So, say what you will. No, but I mean, he was great. You saw our 3 initial characters expand exponentially from book 1 to book 2 to book 5, and we're going, oh, okay, we're seeing these experiences build upon each other, because if you just skipped it, you go, what, he can do this now? Huh? Which isn't necessarily a skill, but we also see some of the reactions between characters change dramatically.
And I think that's
and I think that's
Go ahead, Michael.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that's a major component of immersion. Like, Travis, you're 3 books deep, and your readers who are immersed in this world and have gone along with you on this journey, they know these characters like they're real people. So you can't have a character in book 3 acting like they would in book 1. It's not natural. It wouldn't be natural to write, and it certainly wouldn't be natural to read. And so and that's something that's important to keep in mind for writers. And I think it's something that for most people will happen naturally, but it's a good barometer. Like it's a good thing to test. Like when you're looking at your own work, like perhaps if something isn't feeling right, remember those compounding experiences, and be like, we're not resetting to earlier times in the my default image of this character needs to progress and grow and develop.
And I'll pass it to you in a second, Aaron. to build on what you both already said, I think it's much more important for the characters to grow in personality and experiences than just skills. Sure, maybe they've got a new ability, magical power, pick locks now, whatever it is. That's fine, but that's not the important thing. That's a fun thing. But I don't think that's key to creating a complex hero. Matter of fact, a lot of times, this goes back to my role playing. I played Marvel Superheroes, which is a super simple system. But if you started somebody out with one power, they always knew how to play their character. Because they could only do one special thing, everything else they had to think out like a normal person. But if you started somebody out with 8 powers, they almost always hesitated because they had so many options to mess with. And
yeah, it's the paralysis of overwhelming choice.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a buffet. and then they glut themselves and they don't. But yeah, if they gain the powers and the experiences together, then they relate that ability to certain situations. But it's the experiences that give you the fuel you need to use these abilities. Aaron, what were you?
Yeah, and that's yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, you actually led right into the point that I was going to make. Comics do it right. And so you mentioned Marvel superheroes. If you take a look at any good comic character, okay, any of the ones that have stayed around for a long time, they've got this rogues gallery of opposing forces. I'm going to use Spider-Man as a great example because he's the most popular character on the planet. If you look at him, he's got Doc Ock, Electro, Shocker, a dozen or so guys, and how he interacts with each of them is different. But what's really cool is that he's using the same power set. Okay, yeah, he sticks to walls, he shoots webs, he acts like a spider. But it sets everything up correctly because he's like, oh, but then when we substitute out Doc Ock with Electro, one of his powers is just worthless. Oh, I can't use webs on this guy because it's just gone. He can't get close. Strength is out of the way. But it's able to develop this kind of complex relationship that he's got with each of these guys, which is really kind of cool. Whereas you talk about the paralysis of choice, you got Spider-Man versus Superman. Superman's got every power under the world. Really, he's got 2 vulnerabilities, magic and kryptonite. And that's it. Whereas your Spider-Man character, his weakness is that he's stuck in his own damn head.
Right.
Constantly. He's got to balance family. He's got to balance school.
Survivor's guilt.
And survivor's guilt. That's the big one right there.
Absolutely.
All the while not letting anybody else get close to him for fear that they're going to get trampled like Gwen Stacy. Oh, nope. The second I let somebody close, they're killed.
Spoilers.
I know. If only there was like 50 years of movies
In comics.
and comics.
Now, Mike, did you have anything to say before I throw this next concept into the mix?
I love what's being talked about here. Those limitations, and it's neat to when you have your hero in a situation like now they've developed and if they have powers or if they have any sort of abilities or even if it's just knowledge, or wherewithal or whatever, they get into these situations and it feels earned and it feels fought for, but then you throw them into a new situation and it might require a lesser developed component of them, and to see what that brings out is really cool. And like in the case of a superhero, a literal limitation to their power. You saw this in Deadpool 2. Like they had to create stakes, like they had to shut off his power with that collar, or like what you said with Spider-Man, like he can't get close, so you might have to rely on different sort of wits or agility or what have you. But yeah. Really cool stuff.
Something else. This is the tangent that I'm going to go on, though it totally relates. Something else to build a complex antagonist or hero is to have a good antagonist. Looking at Spider-Man, looking at Batman, these are two great examples. Having a villain that is not just a barrier to overcome, but a real person with their own goals that aren't just a matter as simple of just stopping them. Lex Luthor is a great example of this. He's always got plans within plans. And giving them a villain that does more than just fight with them. That tries to, the one villain I have that's about to save their bacon, but at the same time pin murders on them to create a whole uproar with a whole powerful society against these people straight from the shadows. So helping and hindering at the same time. Aaron?
Oh, you bring up Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor is a great example of this.
One of the
comic
worst
that I read
movie
called
villains ever, though, which is a damn shame.
because he wasn't played right.
Right.
Or he wasn't written correctly.
He should have been written like
is a better way
Kingpin
to
in the Daredevil television series.
Oh,
Yes, absolutely.
fantastic.
But comic I read called somethingpositive.net. The character writes a play. Okay, our protagonist of the comic writes a play. Well, the play, his dad sees and he goes, "You modeled this guy after me." He's like, "Yeah, because I want the villain to be the most complex and interesting character in the play."
Interesting.
Lex Luthor is such a great villain for one reason and one reason only. He is right. He is 100% right as to what's going on. The presence of Superman and all these superpowered beings causes problems. There are trouble magnets for Earth. Lex cares about humanity and he thinks he's the only one smart enough to save it.
Right.
And he's looking at Superman going, this is a god among men who is causing problems. He's causing all these second and third order effects, and he's got to be stopped. He's the problem. Even though he's helping people and doing all this, he creates bigger problems than he can possibly solve. When you look at the Joker for Batman, you've got this madman running around streets in a costume, and then you have the Joker. Neither one of them is sane.
That's true.
In Justice League, Batman is talking to Wonder Woman, and he says, "Oh no! I'm a rich boy with parent issues." He's self-aware at least, but he's still running around dressed up like a bat.
Right. So how do you guys develop your villains to help build your hero? Michael?
Well, something that was really sticking out to me as Aaron was talking about Lex Luthor, and I think this is really true. Like, your readers suspend disbelief because your characters don't suspend disbelief. Because as far as your characters go, this is their real world. Everything is really happening to them, and so they need to react as if it's real. And if something doesn't make sense, they got to be like, "That doesn't make any sense," you know.
Not only do they react, they overreact as well.
Oh yeah,
Which is normal human behavior.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they overreact and they react based on their personality traits, what that type of person would become. And it's interesting, like, and we all among us, we write sci-fi and we write fantasy, so people may have abilities either through magic or technology.
Isn't it weird to call Winslow sci-fi? But he is, isn't he?
I guess he's sci-fi. Yeah, I had to. That was a thing, and for a marketing episode, we may talk about like the pitch, but I had to come up with a whole new genre to call it, because sci-fi. When you think about sci-fi, you think about like Aaron's book. You think about space, you know, or you think about maybe something like Black Mirror, like technology or the future.
But strangely enough, I didn't write a sci-fi novel. I wrote a pulp novel that takes place in a sci-fi universe.
There you go.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Star Wars, which is a western in a in a sci-fi universe.
Yeah, or like samurai stuff. It's a lot of stuff. But yeah, so I ended up calling it folkloric fantasy, which was, as far as I know, Michael Thompson original trademark.
Not that there's stuff that isn't comparable, but yes, it's
Yeah. Oh, sure. And so I think for villains to help define your character, and villains can be done in all sorts of ways. But we talked about this a little bit without talking about the official term of it last episode, which is the shadow, which is like the inverse when you have your hero go up against your villain, and the reason they might literally be at odds or figuratively be at odds because of their roles within the art is because like what do they represent, and how does that clash? In Winslow, Scalpi is the antagonist, and he represents logic and order, and doing things by the books. And Winslow represents is the ultimate expression of going with your gut. And when things work out for Winslow, that infuriates Scalpi, who he worked hard for this, and thus that informs his villainous actions. And Winslow's like, what are you talking about? I'm right, So, and thus they have amazing arguments. And I love an argument, and he's a great villain because he's just a regular guy, in World of the Orb. These are, we have, magic and there's, life or death and powers and stuff. But in Winslow, it's these different ideas of how to do things right. And then they clash, and you get these great, I love an argument where both characters are right, and it's just each person's living in their own mind. So that's a really successful argument to me. What do you think, Aaron?
Well, in Civil War, I see Travis. In the Civil War comics, you had Tony Stark and Captain America both making an argument. Well, how do you set it up to where one side wins, one side loses, but everybody's still happy at the end? And what they came up with was Tony Stark wins the war but loses the argument.
Right.
And vice versa.
Right.
Which, to you, Travis, and I got one other thing after that, though.
I want to read one of our viewers' comments. Wordowin says, villains are people the hero antagonizes. And I think that's a great way to look at a villain, because quite often we've seen, again, going back to the comic references, the villains are quite often made by the hero's actions. Or at least they're empowered by the hero's actions. They are the catalyst that causes the villain to step forward and do more.
Yeah.
They are the hero is the villain's antagonist, as he just said.
Perfectly put. Thank you, Word.
Another great comic reference on that one is there's a great meme that shows Sauron, okay? He's basically a dinosaur mutate being opposed by, I think it's Spider-Man. He goes, with this technology, you could cure cancer. You could do anything. He's like, I don't want to cure cancer. I want to make dinosaurs. And he's I want to turn people into dinosaurs.
That's hilarious.
It is. But I mean, what I try to do is I try to set up this force. It doesn't. You start off with a shadow force of, okay, this is the world that they want to change or that they want to maintain, okay? Because you either got the status quo or you got where they want to go with it. And then I go, all right, what's our hero trying to do? Are they trying to maintain the status quo, or are they trying to change the world from the villain's view, depending on how much control they got? If you got a big overarching concept enemy, they're in charge, or they're constantly working away. But if you're doing it over a series of novels, them trying to change the world makes them seem inept. So it's almost better to start them off with where they're in the power. And then you're here. But if you're just doing like a one-off, oh, okay, this is a he's just opposing an apocalyptic event, or something for his worldview, something that would just be, oh, we cannot let this go.
Yeah. I like what John said here, Conquest Publishing. we've had a villain and hero that followed the same path. One just went to the extreme.
I wonder which one.
And yeah, I wonder too.
Both.
I mean, it reminds me of like there's all sorts of great things in literature and art that do that, like
Moriarty.
Moriarty, Magneto, and Professor X. You know, and
Mhm.
there are different ideas of
Well, it's a nuanced argument about the same concept.
Mhm.
yeah.
So, we get that with friggin' Hogwarts, friggin' J.K. Rowling's books. We get Voldemort, but not Voldemort himself. Voldemort's just kind of a predecessor of a concept, to where Dumbledore and his old partner had a nuanced disagreement, and Voldemort is just one of the second order effects that take place after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We want to see. You got to be able to put yourself in the villain as well, otherwise he becomes cartoony. Which isn't necessarily a great thing, but he stops being believable when he's a cartoon. It's almost better that the hero be slightly cartoonish than the villain.
Interesting.
And
Which
then-
you did, I think, probably unintentionally, is Winslow is somewhat cartoonish.
He kind of is, yeah.
Scalpy is not.
He's bigger than life, and Scalpy is like, and something we, the colors that surround them also in the imagery, especially in the second book, like the cold metals and stuff, it would be Scalpy, and then Winslow has all these like bright, vibrant things. There's a great moment in spoiler alert, but there's a great moment in the early chapters of the second book where there's sort of a thawing aspect, and I won't say how that comes about, but as soon as things like shift to be more Winslow style, then the weather like literally changes, and the sky is all these different colors, whereas before everything was like almost like described like a noir. Everything was just black and white, literally on account of the weather, and yeah. What do you guys think about the way in which you write the book, the different ways that allows you to make the hero complex, like first person versus third person limited, third person omniscient?
Go ahead, Aaron.
Travis? Okay. I lean towards first person, limited perspective, so we only know what the narrator knows.
Right.
Now, I'm writing in past tense, so it's a story that he's telling. So he's got some insight as to what's going to happen, but he's trying to keep the story relevant as we go forward. So you get little tangents and things like that. He goes, oh, this is important to understand so that you can understand the rest of the story as you're going. If you dive into third person omniscient, you can start seeing these villains and things like that take place. And that's one of the things I ran into a lot of trouble with early things of Icarus Black, is because I want to see the villain.
Yeah.
And I got to put a name to it early. Make it personal, increase the stakes.
Yeah.
With my narrator in this one actually being Val, it makes it a little easier because he's got access to networks and things like that. So I'm able to see things and dive into that omniscient to a degree.
That's interesting. Yeah. I like that.
For me, and then I want to branch out into something else Michael said earlier. First person versus third person or any other type. I think it's the way the story speaks to you when you're formulating it. And I have seen people who have gotten part of the way through it one way and went, this doesn't work like this, I need to do it the other way. In Journal of a Stranger, it's all first person after the fact. And it's fun to see him hint at, oh, but that's going to change, you'll see. And reading Richard Matheson's books recently, who wrote Stir of Echoes, I Am Legend, and what was the other one I read of his? What Dreams May Come. he did all his, or those that in particular, first person. Actually, I'm not sure about I Am Legend. I haven't read that one yet. But these other two,
It's good.
is it first person?
Yeah. Yes, it's first person. It is not the same as the movie.
Right. No, I expected that.
But it's a first person narrator style, much like Persona non grata, actually.
And
Cool.
the same for these other two that I mentioned. And so you get to see it unfold as they did. And it's interesting, there's times he tries to bring up building of tension where the character knows something and he's not going to reveal it to the reader. And it's meant, I know, it jarred me for a moment when it happened also. But you could tell he's withholding that information for not necessarily the end of the book, but for later in the scene or in the next scene where the reveal is. And Sherlock Holmes does this a lot, where, Watson knows Sherlock Holmes knows something because he's also writing it after the fact. But
Well, that's where we get into the foreshadowing, and if it's done right, sweet. If it's done wrong, it's jarring.
And what a great opportunity for personality as well.
definitely first person
So
I
real.
feel gives so much more personality because you're in the head. Whereas
Yes.
third person, I definitely enjoy jumping back and forth between to give you the reader knows what's happening on the villain's side. They know, and I just took a note after this conversation or during this conversation because I need to go back and flesh out, even if it's just a couple more sentences for the villain of why is he right? Sure, he's doing it because he's got personal issues, but also why he's not just going to go forward because of personal issues. He's got to have a bigger picture. Why would he do it better being in control, being in charge, having this power? And I need to give that to him so he's more black and white, flesh and blood, and real and right. Now, something else I wanted to talk about, which I'll real quick read Wordowin's comment here from the chat. It says, for me, first and third person are more about the personality of the main character and the story itself. You know what, Michael? You didn't have a chance to talk about this, and then I'll bring up this other topic.
I think we've covered it pretty well. I think first person, you get your main character's gloss on the situation. So, the world is the interpretation of the world is changed when a character is describing it, and so. And I mean, a great way to do that is to sort of embed parts of yourself in the characters, and this may happen unconsciously, but like a component of your personality, and then dialed to 11, and you see what that type of person thinks of the world and thinks and interprets other characters and other situations. So it's about the interpretation and the storytelling aspect of it, and how would this person tell the story, whereas third person. And it depends on how limited the third person is for your hero, but you may not see everything. You may not see or hear their thoughts, or you may if it's really limited. I've got a third person limited on my main character in Winslow, so we can hear his thoughts, and so we do know when he's what he's thinking versus what he's saying. The mask. That he wears, like, around his less than supportive assistant editor. So we know how he feels, and but then with your other characters, you would be reading them just like you'd be reading and interpreting people in real life. You'd see like little facial expressions, or see if they're withholding something, or and interpret it that way. So. Yeah, I think that's how it affects it. But yeah, really good conversation.
Aaron?
Have either of you ever read Bram Stoker's Dracula?
Yes.
Okay. The reason I bring that one up is it's written in a different format. It's all letters, entries, diary. It's all written from the first person, but from different points of view as you go along. Well, Barnes,
Yeah, I've seen that.
It's kind of an interesting trick. It's called an epistolary. Don't I will butcher the pronunciation of that, but it's kind of cool in that regards because we get every character's point of view, and it's treated as a collected diary or case file,
Yeah.
if you will. And that's another way to approach the same problem. If you want to
That's
give
interesting. Yeah.
a third person feel, but using first person narrative technique, or vice versa, you can use something like that.
Yeah, I know a couple authors who do that, and like their chapter titles are the name of whatever character the point of view is. And it's funny you mentioned Dracula. I was at a friend's book signing in at another friend's shop, and he was telling me he's a horror writer, and he got to meet and have lunch with the grandson of Stoker, and talk to him about like the first 100 pages of the book that were apparently scrapped when it went to publishing, and then it's getting republished as a prequel, and there's a new book that's either coming out or out called Dracul, that was written by the grandson that he got to speak to. But yeah, that was really interesting. What were you gonna say, Travis?
A quick footnote on that is Gene Killigratis did a trilogy that picks up the very last page of Bram Stoker's Dracula, Covenant with a Vampire, Covenant of a Vampire. Really good trilogy, highly recommend it. Done in the same style and format. But what I wanted to say earlier, Michael, you mentioned imagery for your characters.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
want to talk and wrap up this topic right now in the next 5 minutes or so and talk about how we make our heroes look. Because in classic storytelling, your hero has this big, he got the shiny armor and the big sword and the perfect smile and the hair that blows just right in the wind. But to write that character actually creates a kind of boring character unless you're making a parody of it. Or when you draw away from that image, you have the broken real personality and person inside of the armor and everything. So how do you guys clothe your character, physically build your character's image so they're a hero?
Something that you brought up on there, one of the things I always tried to do is I like to imagine that we're watching a movie, or I take a very graphic kind of setup in there. I like the reader to fill in as many of the blanks as possible because I'm lazy. No, but they've got a much better imagination than I've got writing skills, is the reason I do that. But something that's kind of cool is use horror movies as kind of a template, okay? Where you've literally got your audience going, "Don't go into the friggin' woodshed. What are you, an idiot?"
Right.
Because they know more, because they're reading everything. From a first-person thing, they already know what that character knows up until that point. But when they're second-guessing the decisions that this guy's going to make, you go, no, this seems like a bad idea. The character already knows it's a bad idea because he's telling it in the past. He survives because he's telling it in the past. But you got this great, oh, no, what are you doing? That's stupid. Don't do, oh, that's why it was stupid. And they get a little bit of an emotional payoff on the back end because they were right, the character was wrong, everything kind of turned out okay, but they saw something coming.
Okay.
I think for clothing or appearances, it is a great opportunity to just embody what your character represents. And I mean, this may come about naturally if you spend a lot of mental time getting to know your character. Then you might just naturally know how they would dress. Like Marvin in World of the Orb is a very reserved young man, and he's very much in his head, and he wears very innocuous clothes. He's got the collared shirt and the khakis, and he's a good student. And then Andy, his best friend, is very loud, very brazen and boisterous, and you will know that he's in a room when he's there. So he has this bright orange jacket that, I mean, is a questionable fashion choice, but he loves it, and so and that's his uniform, and the characters, they have a color scheme, and green and orange, they make you feel certain ways, hot color, cool color, foreground, background, and then Winslow has all these scars, and he's all grizzled up, and every star he'll reference his scars as he's telling other characters' stories. He's like, clip me real good, see, when he's talking about in the mermaid story in the second
So
chapter
do you have a list
of Winslow Hawk.
of different scars that he's told stories about, so you can make sure you don't repeat the scar with a different story?
It's all up here. It's all. I got it all. I got it all memorized. Yeah. What were you gonna say, Aaron?
Well, no. I mean, we work under the assumption that Winslow is an unreliable narrator. He's not the narrator, but part of the plausible disbelief of the character is that he's an unreliable narrator. We don't trust what he's saying until we see it on the page.
Yeah.
It's like, no, he's telling fish tales,
right?
Which is really the concept of the character. He's got all these fish tales which are blown out, hyperbolic, etc. So, oh yeah, I got this scar. Didn't you say you got that scar? No, that's the one right above it.
That's perfect. Yeah, that's exactly what he would do, and I think he would truly revel in the uncertainty of certain characters like Keeley, who is constantly busting his chops, and then of course Winslow produces some sort of item from his escapade, and is like, in the middle of the book, he pays for everyone's dinner with a piece of the treasure that he just told a story about, and then everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, it's all real!" And then Keeley's like, "Do you make these up ahead of time?"
With me, I don't mind giving them some of the stereotypical stuff, but I want definitely the more Star Wars and Star Trek look. I want the grungy look. I want the broken down, lived in look. I want to make that character feel more real, because we all know, when you're writing fantasy, where do they go to the bathroom? How do they clean their clothes? You want them kind of, or I do at least, I want them to feel lived in and worn. And
yeah,
I think that shows their
there's
inner
story
turmoil also.
embedded.
What's that?
There's story embedded in the threads.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts on this, Aaron, before we go into our...
Something I've said during D&D games, and you've probably heard me countless times. You can tell how evil somebody is by how well they're dressed.
How clean they are.
How clean they are, how well they're dressed, because they've got vanity, which is just one of those classic vices. Horrid movie, which I love to death. Is Mortal Kombat, the very first one.
Aha, yeah.
The villain is dressed in these amazing clothes. Everybody else is kind of dirty, grungy, lived in. They're tradesmen. They're doing these things, and you're like, oh. We get the same thing with Star Wars. Our stormtroopers are in white, impeccable armor. Darth Vader's running around in that ski suit thing, but it's clean, it's neat.
Yeah.
All the Imperial officers are in a uniform. They are not ragtag. They are one contrast, which goes back to last week's episode, whereas we flip it on its end, and our heroes aren't.
Yeah.
In Persona non grata, I use Ares' jacket to contrast varying emotions. He starts off in the red Legionnaire's jacket, and when he's undercover, he's wearing the blue. And then he flips back when it becomes important again.
Perfect. Symbolism.
Okay, guys, we're going to wrap this up now. I want to let you know our next topic that we'll be discussing in episode 18 is going to be how to balance social media. We're going to go into that soon enough. Aaron, if you want to let chat know what's going on, I'll do the wrap up here. and then we'll go to the closing music. I want to thank everybody for supporting us by all the follows, all the bits, all the subscriptions, donations, etc. There's some bits right there. Thank you, Spacey Tracy. Here's to you. Thank you for the bits and the support. And thank you most of all just for showing up, guys. I do appreciate that. Now, don't forget you can catch us on our other podcasts here at twitch.tv/Travis Tavern Talk. So we do have Stealing for Survival, the Dungeons & Dragons game that takes place in the world of Portals on the same continent, as well as Monday Night Talk of the Tavern, where we have topics, tangents, and toasts. I think we're going to do an outro here and all that. So you guys have a great night, and for those of you on the podcast, make sure you check out the other ones.
Thank you for joining author Travis I. Sivart and the other writers, content creators, and all-around amazing people for our discussion here on Write Night. Join us again soon, and until you do, make sure you create with passion, enjoy the journey, and remember, every night can be right enough.